Bible, Zephaniah.
Okay, today we're in the book of Zephaniah, and this is probably the most radical look at the description of the day of the Lord. Very, very stark, very depressing if you just look at the destruction that takes place. That day of the Lord theme throughout the Old Testament really comes to its pinnacle here. Although we see some of the expressions of it as we go on into Zechariah and really see the final, not only the destruction, but the restoration. But we're going to start in Zephaniah today. Zephaniah is prophesying to Judah, the southern kingdom, about 100 years after Israel has already fallen to Assyria. It gives us the time frame in chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "The word of the Lord which came to Zephaniah, son of Cushi, son of Gedaliah, son of Amariah, son of Hezekiah, in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah." Now, probably I could have got by that he did this in the days of Josiah, son of Ammon. That would have been good enough for me. But it described Zephaniah, who he is, and his lineage there. So the days of Josiah, when we read about Josiah was a king, a young king, came in at 8 years old, brought incredible reforms. But it's interesting, there were several prophets that began to prophesy during that time. And they were prophesying a lot of doom and destruction. And it was in a time of revival, essentially, in the nation. So we see that the prophecies aren't necessarily just related to that time period and what's going on, but they're related to the cumulative effects of the people's lifestyle leading up to that time. And the people had really despised and forsaken God in so many ways and turned to other gods. So we see that the prophecy of Zephaniah then is speaking to Judah about what's coming ahead, and it's not good. We read in verse 2, chapter 1, it says, "I will completely remove all things from the face of the earth, declares the Lord." Wow. Okay. And one thing you should understand there is when it says earth there, that word can be translated ground or land. Probably the best translation in this, or the best reference, would be the land, and it's talking about the land of Judah, the land that's being spoken of, the land where they're living, the land where the sins have been committed. And so it's not talking necessarily about a total destruction of all of the earth here. It's talking about a total destruction in the area that's being prophesied to. In verse 7, there's once again the reference to the day of the Lord. It says, "Be silent before the Lord God, for the day of the Lord is near, for the Lord has prepared a sacrifice and has consecrated his guests." Here the day of the Lord is near. Man has had his day, and it seems like in man's day and man's control over the earth, whenever it comes to a culmination, it shows that man's not done very well. Man's desires are greedy. They lead to immorality. They're focused just simply on self, and they're full of pride. And so when God's judgment comes, it deals with all of these things, with the greed, with the self-centeredness, with the pride. And so we go on here in chapter 1, verse 12. It says, "And it will come about at that time that I will search Jerusalem with lamps, and I will punish the men who are stagnant in spirit, who say in their hearts, the Lord will not do good or evil." And we see here that there's a place where people become so indifferent to God. They feel, well, God's, he's not doing anything. What does it matter? He's not going to do good. He's not going to bless. He's not going to judge. He's not going to do anything. And it's because here it describes it as the people's hearts have become stagnant. They're stale. They're in mediocrity. It's like as we get to the New Testament, we look in the book of Revelation, they're lukewarm. They don't, nothing really, God doesn't really care. He's a lot like me. And so that's the problem so often in the scriptures, is we think God is like us and he has the same characteristics we do, and we don't understand his ways are higher than ours, as we read in Isaiah. Verse 13, "Moreover, their wealth will become plunder and their houses desolate. Yes, they will build houses but not inhabit them, and plant vineyards but not drink their wine." And that's, the descriptions of what's going to happen in this day of judgment. And it's describing it to the people that say, God doesn't care. He's not going to do good. There's not going to be any judgment. We see that kind of reflection often in the scriptures. In the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, we saw that the future sons-in-law of Lot, they said, when Lot told them about the judgment that was coming, says they started laughing. They thought he was joking. And so we see that often. We don't understand the real nature of the intensity of the judgments and God's intensity over what's taking place. So here we start to see the great day of the Lord as described in verse 14. Near is the great day of the Lord, near and coming very quickly. Listen, the day of the Lord, in it the warrior cries out bitterly. Now that's, it's the man screaming like a little girl, I guess we would say it in our days. A day of wrath is that day, a day of trouble and distress, a day of destruction and desolation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Not a lot of good description there of, joy and fun times. It says, a day of trumpet and battle cry against the fortified cities in the high corner towers. And I will bring distress on men so that they will walk like the blind, because they have sinned against the Lord. And their blood will be poured out like dust, and their flesh like dung. Yow. Neither their silver nor their gold will be able to deliver them on the day of the Lord's wrath, and all the earth will be devoured in the fire of his jealousy, for he will make a complete end, indeed a terrifying one, of all the inhabitants of the earth. And once again, this is such a gigantic description of the day of the Lord. And once again, all the inhabitants of the earth, probably most specifically speaking of the land there that's coming under that judgment. In chapter 2, there's kind of a given how people should respond. It says in verse 2, before the decree takes effect, the day passes like chaff. Before the burning anger of the Lord comes upon you, before the day of the Lord's anger comes upon you, seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth, who have carried out his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger. So there's the Lord's instruction as to how to respond, and it's always in that place of humility and humbling ourselves. And in verse 8, it says, I have heard the taunting of Moab, the revilings of the sons of Ammon, with which they have taunted my people and become arrogant against their territory. Therefore, as I live, declares the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab will be like Sodom, the sons of Ammon like Gomorrah, a place possessed by nettles and salt pits of perpetual desolation. The remnant of my people will plunder them, and the remainder of my nation will inherit them. So although judgment is coming to Judah, says Judah will actually rise up against those that have initiated this, and those ungodly nations that have actually brought about, have been used by God, his hand, to bring about the judgment. They also will be judged. We see that over and over again in the scriptures. Verse 11, the Lord will bring will be terrifying to them, for he will starve all the gods of the earth, and all the coastlands of the nations will bow down to him, everyone from his own place. You also, O Ethiopians, will be slain by the sword, and he will stretch out his hand against the north and destroy Assyria. He will make Nineveh a desolation, parched like the wilderness. And those that were righteous in those days would be wondering, says, Lord, when are you going to do something? And here he's saying, I will revive you. So then we move on here, and it says in chapter 3, it says in verse 8, therefore wait for me, for the day when I rise up to the prey. Indeed, my decisions to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out on them my indignation and my burning anger, for all the earth will be devoured by the fire of my zeal. But then it says this, and here's the restoration that's going to happen in the hearts of the people. It says, for then I will give to the peoples purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord, to serve him shoulder to shoulder. And so there'll be a people that will come together in unity, that God's going to have a purified remnant. He's going to do something that will finally bring restoration, purity to his people that he's chosen for a demonstration of his covenant on the earth, which is this people of Israel, the Israelites, in this case, particular Judah. Verse 11, in that day you will feel no shame because of all your deeds by which you have rebelled against me. For then I will remove from your midst your proud, exalting ones, and you will never again be haughty on my holy mountain. It says in verse 13, verse 12, but I will leave among you a humble and lowly people. They will take refuge in the name of the Lord. The remnant of Israel will do no wrong and tell no lies, nor will deceitful tongue be found in their mouths, for they shall feed and lie down with no one to make them tremble. So once again, the restoration, it affects the way they speak. It affects their language and what they say. And this Zephaniah ends with this in chapter 3 and verse 19 and 20. Behold, I am going to deal at that time with all your oppressors. I will save the lame, gather the outcasts, and I will turn their shame into praise and renown in all the earth. At that time I will bring you in, even at that time when I gather you together. Indeed, I will give you renown and praise among all the peoples of the earth, when I restore your fortunes before your eyes, says the Lord. So once again, it seems like what happens in God's judgment is the people that have taken control, the people that in the natural world have taken control, those that are greedy and they're exercising the control over the people, they are the oppressors. They really are oppressors. And here God comes to rescue. When he comes, he rescues those, the lame, the outcast, all of those that have been rejected. And he brings to judgment all of those who have walked in pride. And his promise to Judah is that there'll come a day when there'll be a remnant where their mouths, there'll be no deceit in their mouths anymore. They won't be proud. They won't be exalting ones. They'll never again be haughty, it says in his holy mountain. So when the Lord comes, we see the consistency in the Isaiah 2 passage and the Micah 4 passage of his judgment is coming against the proud. And so New Testament, what's the instruction? Humble yourself in the eyes of the Lord. Humble yourself before the Lord and he'll exalt you. And so that's the message we see here, even in this book and this prophecy in Zephaniah about the day of the Lord.